Hi everybody, this is Dave Roundtree. Good to see you again this week, and I trust you enjoyed episode 2 of Ghost Stalkers. Tonight I want to talk a little bit about what exactly we did in there. As you recall from the show, I set up 2 pretty high-powered laser systems to create a pretty powerful grid that was able to print well through the infrared lighting that we had for the static cameras up there on the second floor. So we couldn't use the standard little pointer type of lasers to do that because they're not powerful enough to print. So we used a much more powerful system. And additionally, we added smoke. Now what you didn't see in the episode is the time that was spent securing that room so that it was draft free. Although there is a hint of that if you remember on any of the scenes looking up and wondering why it looked like there was a big black tarp on the ceiling. That tarp was used to seal the skylight, which had air leaks in it, and it prevented those air leaks from creating any kind of drafts or disturbances in the room. The second thing that you didn't see is that I walked around to various locations around the room carrying an anemometer, a small, very high precision anemometer which measures wind speed. It would move if I walked while holding it. So the slightest breathing or breath or any kind of air movement would cause the propeller on it to spin and register a speed. There were absolutely 0 drafts in the room. However, the smoke didn't work out so well because the room was so huge. And the smoke machine that we had was really not big enough to fill that room to the level that we needed for the smoke to actually be an effective tool in that investigation. But the lasers were quite effective, as you noticed at the very end of the episode, where we had some type of shadow figure peep its head up over the wall or arm or something, appendage of some sort up on the wall. And what was key about that was it blocked the laser beam. If you noticed when I was walking around during the testing, laser beams were clearly printing all over my body, and everyone else that was in the field had the laser beams clearly printing on their body that faced the laser beam. Well, whatever it was that popped its body up or head up or arm or we're still debating on exactly what that was, did not have the beam printing on them, which means that the light was absorbed by whatever it was that moved. Now what you also didn't see was what was on the other side of that wall. On the other side of that wall was about a 3-foot deep debris pile of construction debris, which made navigating over there in daylight very precarious, much less at night. And had someone been moving around over there, you would have clearly heard it because there was construction materials, boards, wood, all types of debris that had been ripped down from various parts of the upper floor where the room was located. So there was a lot of debris on the other side of that wall, and it was not an area that I could even get to during the testing when I was filming because of all the stuff in the way. So whatever that was occupying the same area that this pile of debris was located at. So that was kind of interesting, and you didn't know that. You had to have been there to have known that. A lot of the stuff that I do prior to doing the experiments on the episodes are setting the area up for a controlled environment. And what that means is that we control access, we control airflow. In the case of using smoke, we want to reduce all airflow in the room to 0 so that the only thing that we have in play is the actual heat convection or temperature convection currents in the room. Now normally they will cause smoke to rise or fall. So it's good to keep that in mind because we may be using a similar type of technology in the future. Normally we would be looking for the smoke to settle as the temperature settled. There would be some up and down movement based on differentials in temperature. But if something moved through that smoke field, it would clearly create disturbances in the smoke. Well, because the room was so big and the smoke dissipated so quickly, the smoke was not an effective tool at this location. However, the high-powered laser grid was. And we had just talked prior to filming that episode about my theory on shadow people, and I had been working with a couple of other physicists for a while conjecturing about the whole idea of this phenomena. And I have proposed that what if it's a life form based on antiphotonic emissions? What's an antiphoton? Well, it's the opposite of a photon. A photon emits light. An antiphoton would cancel out or absorb light. We know that human beings are photonic creatures. We have a biophotonic emission that comes from our DNA and from other cells in our body. The Ryan Research Center is doing really pioneering research on ultraviolet light emission by human beings, specifically mediums, psychics, healers, and martial artists. They have found that when these individuals in a very controlled environment begin to do or use their gifts, the ratio of photonic generation in the room dramatically increases. I mean, incredibly dramatically increases. So we are generating light. So the notion that we are beings of light is not a notion, it's a fact. We are beings of light. So are these creatures beings of darkness? We don't know yet. But it seemed like that this thing recoiled very rapidly once it hit that laser beam that it blocked. Now my question is, was there a absorption of light, or was there an annihilation of particles that prevented that light from printing? And if that annihilation occurred, could it be that in fact we may have injured or damaged or caused this individual entity or creature to have pain? We don't know, but it sure was an interesting experiment, and it proved one thing, that to me it proved that at least from what we saw, that a shadow being actually does absorb light. So trying to understand the mechanic of that is obviously going to take more than one experiment. But I thought that that was one of the exciting parts of the show, aside from the new words that Chad learned to utter when he, was frightened and everything. And I just want to address one thing. We've had a lot of scuttlebutt from different negative individuals commenting on Chad's lack of courage. Let me tell you something. True courage is facing something like that alone and being scared out of your wits and saddling up anyway. Chad, even though he was frightened, continued to go into these places and into these locations. So I would like for people not to judge individuals in the show because they're not there. They're not sitting in these places by themselves alone for 7 to 8 hours. And so really they have no data in which to base their assumptions on, because they haven't been there and they haven't felt it. So having said all that, the three of us are close. We're brothers. We care about each other. And during the course of shooting this series, there were a lot of close calls. There were a lot of things that happened that we couldn't explain as well. And we captured a lot of it on video. So keep watching and look for next week's episode where we have something completely different. So good night and take care.